So we just reviewed our first episode. What was it? Introduction to Christianese?
Yeah, the first episode.
Holy smokes. It was
We
kind
pretty
of
much figured out that says it all. So we're done.
If you want to know what this whole podcast is about, just go back and
Episode
listen
one.
to that. We totally cover everything in that one episode.
But we do, kind of. Like we, without really meaning to, we give a high-level overview of then the topics that we dig into in the other episodes.
Yeah, it's crazy. So what Kacie and I are going to do is we took notes going through and listening to it again, and we just kind of wanted to give a high-level recap. We know that not everyone has 45 minutes to an hour to listen to a podcast, so we wanted to do these mini pods to be able to kind of summarize the highlights, the major topics that we talk about. And then so this is going to be about 15 minutes or so. So if you're interested in what we're talking about, we will refer you back to the full episode if you want a little bit more.
Which exists on both YouTube and Spotify and Apple Podcasts.
Awesome. Libsyn too. Can you go to Libsyn?
No, I think that's just the site that we upload
We just
to
host
that
it.
then it goes to.
You
So don't go to
you
Libsyn.
can't get there. Listen to her. Okay, so we'll compare notes.
Okay.
All right. So what's the first? You started writing before I did, I think.
So I picked up on that when we were just laying the whole thing out in terms of what is Christianese. You mentioned that it's a language passed down. And so that stood out to me because I think a theme of what we do throughout all the episodes is, if something's passed down, a lot of times you just kind of take it for what it's worth. Like it's just passed down to you and you accept it.
Right.
Whereas we then start to dig further into it and question it and find our own interpretation. So I think
That's awesome.
maybe in the spirit of passing things down and the way things have always been taught, there's become kind of a lack of finding your own belief within those words.
Perfect. And I have a great story.
Quick,
It's gonna be short. It's gonna be short. But I heard a lady say once that she would always cut the end of her ham off before cooking it in the oven because her mom would always do that, and then her mom's mom would always do that. And so when she finally asked her mom why she cuts the end of her ham off, and she said, "Oh, my pan was too short." And so she had been cutting the end of her ham off to cook it when she had a big enough pan
For the whole
to cook
ham.
the whole ham.
See, exactly.
But it's the same exact thing.
Exactly. And how many,
Without investigating why, which is
Right.
what we're doing.
and how many things is your answer to? I don't know. It's just the way we've always done it.
Right. And Christianese is the same thing. It's you
Right.
just hear these things and you just assume face value for whatever it is.
Or
that's
you
being
just
said, or-
assume what was passed down to you, which is
Right.
sometimes fine.
Right.
But it's more, you also have the right to question it and ask the whys and reframe or find your own interpretation of it. You don't
Yeah.
have to just take it for what someone else's interpretation was.
Right. Perfect. Okay, so what I put was truth in big caps. We talk about truth a lot and finding almost a universal truth and the ultimate truth. And I put that goes beyond Christianese. I mean, that's
yeah.
the whole point. So no one religion has a monopoly on truth. So the point is, truth belongs to Christians and people who don't speak Christianese. So it's to take these truths that are in the Christian religion and be able to talk about them in a way that kind of takes the religion off of them and is very applicable to anybody.
Yes. Perfect.
Okay.
So kind of on
Thanks.
that note,
My ego loves that.
on that note, I made a note that you talk about how you were hurt by a lot of these teachings growing up.
Yep.
So now looking back and I'm like, okay, it's not so much the teachings that hurt you. It was
Yep.
your interpretation of them.
Yes.
And you have the right to change your interpretation.
Yep.
So then what I put that maybe the truth that connects us is actually really more of an openness to interpretation. You have the way you see it, I have the way I see it. The way you see it is fine, the way I see it works for me.
Yeah.
And it's not so much so it's the truth isn't a certain way it's taught and a certain meaning. The truth is that maybe it's different for everybody, and that's fine.
Yeah, and at different stages of their life, and 100%. I'm going back to my 100%. I actually put, because I did talk a lot in this episode about being hurt by either Christians or church or whatever. And I wrote, now I can see that I've been hurt because I didn't know how to think for myself.
Ooh, yep.
And I put all resentment that I felt was really towards myself. It was couldn't accept myself. I was hurt because I was rejected and not accepted, is what I thought. Mm-hmm. But what was really happening was I didn't know how to accept myself.
Yes.
And so I wanted the church to show me unconditional love, but I actually found unconditional love through the conflict that came with that. You know what I mean? Like, that's what kind of, I don't know, that was kind of the turning point of me getting alone with myself and listening to myself and accepting myself. And it was all about me. It had nothing to do with anybody else.
Do you feel now more connected to some of the teachings and stuff you initially felt resistance to?
I see them different.
Yeah.
I definitely see them different, but I'm 100% open to them. Yeah.
Because that's another thing that I wrote down was kind of, it's really more about finding your own beliefs within the beliefs you were taught.
Ooh, that's good.
So
say it one more time.
Find your own beliefs within the beliefs you were taught.
I like that.
Because they can live in the same place.
Yes. Yep. And I put scripture as viewed through different lenses and different perspectives, and that's exactly what it is. It's like, it may mean something to one person and with where they are in their life, and it may be very helpful to them at that stage. But for me to look at it through that same lens, being in this stage of my life, may not be how I need to see that.
Right.
Truth.
Yep.
Okay. So
then another big point we brought up in the first episode, which I know when we first started to put this out there, a lot of you heard a lot of feedback in terms of that we shouldn't be questioning the Bible.
Right. Yeah, I did.
So we kind of bring up that I brought up, how many stories in the Bible are actually, in this first episode, I call them analogies. And then in later episodes, we talk about how Jesus only talked in parables.
Parables,
so
yep.
Just to keep an open mind that maybe some of the stories are parables. And so if they are, what could that mean?
Yeah.
And we talk about all the different filters on the Bible, which I think is such an important point. There were a lot of language translations. Obviously it wasn't written in English. Throughout the years, parts have been cut out and removed. And so this is a whole freaking book of parts of the Bible that were removed.
That has the Gospel of Thomas, Mary Magdalene.
Gospel of
has
Judas.
Like her own account of interacting with Jesus.
Right. So we're maybe not always working with a full book when you're looking at the Bible. And then also subjectivity of who wrote it.
Yeah.
Because, if it wasn't a Jesus quote, then you can't help but sometimes put your own thoughts and beliefs into your writing.
Right.
So.
Yep. As a writer,
Right. So just to keep that in mind. So that's a little bit of, I guess, our justification for doing some of this questioning.
And just being able to keep an open mind about questioning too, because I think that's just, for me personally, I never allowed myself to be open-minded about the Bible being looked at in any different way.
Right.
So yeah, that's very good. Do you have anything else about the Bible?
No.
So I did put something that I talked about. You had, in this episode, the first episode, I actually quoted you here. You said, so there's a conflict between what you've been taught to be right versus what you feel on the inside. And I was like, yes, that's exactly it. And then we go on to talk about the ego later on. And so I had even put that the journey, I think for every single person, and I talk about my sexuality and my spirituality, and for me that was a big part of my journey, but everybody has their own learning and unlearning that they have to do.
Yes.
And it looks different. And even though like I give my example and Kacie gives hers, but everybody that is the path for everybody.
Yes.
And so for me, I learned a bunch of worldly stuff, this is what I wrote. My journey was learning a bunch of worldly stuff, which is
all
people's interpretation of scripture, like what was taught to me. So I had to learn all of that, what sin meant and what all of this stuff meant, to really be able to unlearn and find what didn't feel right and what didn't fit with me.
Right.
To be able to kind of connect with my spirit, where where truth is.
Right. And so that
makes
okay.
sense.
Yeah. So that
I'm analyzing it a little bit. But
right. and this is a theme that we end up keeping throughout all the episodes, is kind of the concept of love versus fear. Love being God and fear being the ego.
Yep.
So we start to allude to how, and Jesus even says this is a Jesus quote, that we are all one with God.
Yep.
So we are not of this world.
Right.
Even though we are currently in this world, and that's a whole other episode. We talk about that phrase.
We'll break that one down for you later.
But so our biggerness that is one with God, and then in this life we develop an ego. That's all the mess and the learning of the things of this world, and it's all the fear based. And so really what
how
we're
we
here
define
to do,
things and
exactly, and that creates a lot of judgment and separation, which is sin and all that. And as we go through this life, our task is to unlearn, peel all that back, quiet the ego, and get back to the oneness with God that always exists within us.
Which I think perfect. And I think for me,
thank you.
You're welcome. And I think for me, like even re-listening to this first episode made me realize like my ego and identity got wrapped up in Christianese. Mm-hmm. That became a huge part of my ego.
Right.
Being right as a Christian.
Yeah.
And living the right way. And so worldly stuff doesn't have to look like going out and partying.
Right, which was more my journey. But yeah, exactly. It's any level of, I guess, separation from the realization of how big we really are.
Yes.
And
that
so
can
we make it
like
smaller
anything.
and we put it in a box. You were in a Christianese box.
Right.
I was in like a being cool box. Like people are in all sorts of different boxes, and that is our ego. Our ego wants to label us and say this is who we are and define ourselves, but we're not those things. We are one with God.
I love it. And that is not reserved for any one religion either.
No. And that's a lot of these, many of the words, especially like the word God, and we end up giving new definitions for a lot of the words, but just if you're not extremely religious, as I am not, or certainly wasn't going into this, please don't be turned off by those words, because they're really just much bigger concepts of, it just comes out of love versus fear is really what it's all about, to remove some of the...
And God is love.
Right.
And
the ego is
we
fear.
are one with God, so we are made to exist purely in love.
Yes.
And the ego is fear, and that's what separates us.
Yeah.
Do you have anything else that you...
No, those were kind of there's some rabbit holes that I don't think we should go down, but yeah, that was kind of my high level overview of...
Me too.
Okay. So that's in a nutshell episode 1, which if you kind of just want to get a feel for the conversation and the podcast and what we talk about, it's really pretty much all laid out there in episode 1. However, we recorded it outside in a field because we thought that would be really cool, and then it turns out it's just loud and distracting, and then we didn't really edit anything out, so just... I
was new to editing. We both are new to podcasting.
Episode 1 is rough.
I had no idea. Just, we get a little bit better as it goes on, so.
Do we? But yeah, so if you're interested in episode 1, check it out. Again, it's on YouTube, Christianese, or Apple Podcasts or Spotify. We also have an Instagram handle, Christianese Podcast. So connect with us and follow along, and we hope you enjoy it.
Yep. Later. Really good. Oh, it stopped recording.
Fucking shit.
Just kidding.